speaking to your librarian. She's been here 23 years. I was at Venice High School for 23 years. I started there in '85. In fact, I had Deidre as a student. She's on my drill team.
Don't tell her how long ago
I wish. So at Venice, I was a teacher, then I was dean of students, then I was an assistant principal, and then I was principal. I was principal there from 2000 to 2008. So I have a lot of background, obviously, on this side of town, and even though Casa High School feed into Venice, I dealt with Hamilton High School all the time. So, and then after I left there, I went down to the Office of Instruction at Boulder, and I was a director for secondary programs. So my background is more secondary as opposed to elementary. But prior to my LA Unified experience, I did teach PE in private schools, K-8, in Michigan, in Detroit, and then in LA before I started with LA Unified. So I have my background's in PE and dance, and my credentials K-12. So I did have an elementary experience, but it was a long time ago. So what I'm here today is just to kind of explain. I know, Michelle King and John Daisy, because all the emails that went to them went to me. So it's just better if you have questions, email me, and I'll leave my contact information, because Michelle King and Dr. Daisy, they usually forward that stuff to whatever ESC it's in. So I know you have concerns over some of the budget issues. So I want to just explain it. It might not be the answers you want to hear, but I'd like to explain it as much as possible and kind of let you know kind of the rationale behind it. Some of it's because of the state funding. The first thing, good news, is the district's going to fund 3-hour library positions at all the elementary schools for next year. So that's a good news. And I've been told by the director over the Personnel Commission that the library aid that you want is reachable, because there's a list. See, with the Personnel Commission and with classified positions, they've got more rules and regulations than certificated staff, which are the teachers. So with classified, that's your custodial workers, the clerical staff, cafeteria workers, library aides, some of your TAs, and that they have, because the district laid off and RIFed, a reduction in force, they RIFed so many people, they've got these lists, and they've got to bring those people back first before they can hire new people, before a school can hire new people. Even though Dr. Daisy's really kind of big on autonomy and letting schools hire who they want, we still have to follow the rules of the unions that we deal with. So, but because all the schools are going to get the library aides back, I'm not anticipating that to be an issue. So that's good news. Now with your teacher position, you have to realize that the schools are allocated teachers by the number of students that they have. And I've come to know the elementary world a lot better my 2 years in this position, because at the high school level, it's straight. You get so many kids, and you have norms for certain class sizes. The norm at high school is 40, for non-academic is 42.5. I taught PE, I have 50 to 60 kids in my PE classes and dance classes. And that's still, we don't like it that large, but still in some of those PE classes, it's still, the numbers are that large. But for elementary, K-3 is a 24-to-1 ratio. Now, when the district back in 2008-9, when the budget crunch really started to hit, a lot of the state allowed districts to go away from that norm if they chose to balance their budgets. Many surrounding districts upped the count in their K-3 classes. LA Unified at that time, and when Dr. Daisy came in, kept it at 24-to-1. So that cost the district money, and it affected our secondary schools because those small class, the K-3 classes remained at 24-to-1. So they're not changed. That's going to stay at 24-to-1. For your 4th and 5th grade classes, your norm is 36-to-1. Be that you agree with that or not agree with it, that's the norm that the district has determined for the upper grade classes for 4 and 5. Now I know I checked your numbers last year. So last year you had a total of about 563 students, meaning that you had 16 K-3 teachers. That's what
Yes.
Bruce told me, and then you had 6 4-5 teachers, because
Yes.
we had 187 students. So the projections and ECAS, what ECAS does now is it's a prediction of your enrollment. When I was a sitting principal, the schools kind of predicted what they thought they were going to get, and you would kind of gamble on keeping the number of students you had, and then come norm day, if you had too many teachers, you had to displace. and that meant at the high school level, and even at the second and elementary level, then you have to reorganize your classes. At the secondary level, that meant if that one teacher was teaching 5 classes, you had then 5 classes that had to be absorbed throughout the rest of the school if you did that mid-semester. So I used to kind of go in low. I would try to have maybe not all the teachers I wanted, and then wait and then hire or bring in some subs so that we can at least start the year off with enough teachers. So, but at the elementary level, it's a little harder because you have 2 different norms. You have that 24-to-1, and then you have 36-to-1. There's not a lot of flexibility with that unless you go to split classes. So ECAS now, they predict how many students the district will have. The prediction this year is that the district will lose 15,000 students for the 14-15 school year. And last year it was about the same. So they predict, and they have people that work in demographics, and they look at the city and where populations are growing, where they're decreasing. They look at history of schools. Have they dropped enrollment? Have they gained enrollment? Then they determine what the staffing should look like for the upcoming school year. So for Castle Heights, it was determined that your number of students would be 552, and that you would have approximately 383 students, which is 16 teachers, which is the same you have this year. But for the 4 or 5, it would be 169 students, and that would be 5 teachers instead of 6. And again, it's a guesstimate. Now, they've been pretty on target for the entire district, this 15,000. And those students either move out of the area, go to private schools, go to charter schools, but they're not counted as LA Unified. So, and if I remember, and I meant to, which I didn't bring with me, I looked at your history from the last couple of years, and I think you've gone down a little bit total in terms of students, which is that's not uncommon throughout the district, especially on the west side. When the district did all their building of new schools, which was great, it took kids away from the west side. I don't know if Castle Heights was ever a cap receiver. You know what that means. Cap receivers were a capacity adjustment program. So if schools were overcrowded and on a year-round calendar, they would bus kids to schools that had seats. Again, when I was at Venice, we got 500 kids from Manual Arts High School because they were overcrowded, and they could choose to go to Taft in the Valley, or they could choose to come to Venice. So we would get 500 kids each year from Manual Arts that would become Venice High students. They would get bused in every day, along with the magnet students that we had that chose to come there on a bus. So as though now Manual Arts, they built a number when West Adams High School opened that to relieve Manual Arts. So then Venice lost those 500 seats. So they've every year been kind of looked at for charter relocation, because now they do have empty classrooms because they lost a lot of kids that didn't live in the area. So that's kind of where the district has been going. The population has been fluctuating. The fact that they've opened up a lot of schools, I think it's probably affected more the west side schools because a lot of us were cap receivers as opposed to other parts of the city. So, and now with the new funding, the LCFF and the LCAP, the extra money is going to be going to schools that have a high percentage of foster students, English learner students, and Title I students. Those are the schools that are going to get the bulk of the money. When we have this the May revise came in, unfortunately it wasn't what the district had hoped it would be. You might have read in the paper that districts have to pay in more into CalSTRS, which is the state retirement fund for teachers. If you're not aware, teachers do not pay into Social Security. They pay into the state retirement fund, and that's kind of covers their pension. And it lost money with all the investments back in 2008, 2009. So the state's asking all the districts in the state to contribute more money to that fund. So we're not getting as much extra money as we thought. So Dr. Daisy is proposing to the Board of Education, and again, the Board of Education is the final say-so in all these budget issues. Dr. Daisy makes recommendations from staff, but it's the Board of Ed that finally, that votes on the final budget. So with the new funding, again, schools that have high number of foster kids, EL, and Title I, will get those extra supports if there's any to be given to schools. There might be schools that might get an extra counselor. I mean, like at the middle school level, right now they get one counselor for like 1,000 kids. It's kind of silly. High school, it's one counselor for 500 kids. They'd like to give some relief to that. The other thing that schools will be getting, all the clerical at the schools will be going to e-basis. And you probably know that, because I know I talked about that at our meeting. Meaning that the school secretary, the last couple years has been what they call e-basis, on the same basis as your principal, but then they got days off. They had to take furlough, they were unassigned days they didn't get paid. Now they're gonna go on to e-basis, and they won't have any of these unassigned days. Then, do you have an office tech or one office? That office tech is also gonna go e-basis, and they were on this B-basis, so they're gonna come back earlier, meaning that they are getting a little bit of a raise. But the district really felt that they've cut the clerical so much at the schools that they needed to give something back. So that's another positive thing that's happening for all the schools district-wide, secondary, elementary and secondary, for the clerical staffs to go e-basis. Now with teaching ratios, I'm not hearing that anything's going to change in terms of class size at this point. Oh, I'm sorry, except 8th and 9th grade math and English classes. They're gonna lower those class size by 2 students. But that's 8th grade English and math and English classes, and 9th grade English and math classes. So it'll go from like 38 to 36. It's not a lot, but it's something. Also, years ago in high school, English 9th grade and 11th grade English classes were 20 to 1. Once the budget crisis hit, they changed that and they increased those norms to, I think in high school for academic classes it's 38, around 38 per student, 38 to 39. So they're trying to whittle away slowly at some of those reductions. But right now they're not changing anything at the elementary level. And Dr. Daisy said that as money comes in, any money, new money for this year, it'll probably go toward this, especially high schools, because they have been long neglected. And again, if kids aren't graduating from high school, it's kind of a big deal. So high schools will get, if anything comes back, high schools will get some resources, then the middle schools, and then elementaries. So in terms of your dilemma, you're scheduled for 21 teachers for the fall. And my understanding, that would mean that you would have to have a split class somewhere, and then the school can determine that if that's the case. I know I've come to learn that, of course, elementary schools don't like to do splits. But the way the norming charts are, that's kind of what happens at schools, and every once in a while schools do have to have splits. Now, when school opens, a principal could decide to keep a teacher if they don't have the numbers when school opens. That comes out of they have a new budget that they get for substitute teachers. And if your numbers grow, and even if the first week of school you had enough kids to generate a new position or that additional position, we can work to have that be put in place. Now, come norm day, and that's the 4th week in, as long as your numbers have maintained, and what my experience has been, most elementary schools, the numbers do maintain. Sometimes at the secondary schools they don't, but most of the elementary numbers maintain. And then if you've got enough students, come norm day, boom, you're good, and the district would backfill that, the money that the school had to pay on that teacher for the first 4 weeks of the school year. Now, worst case scenario, you don't have enough students, then you have to displace that teacher and then juggle the classes around. And that's just something that schools have to deal with, and it's difficult for the elementary principal to make that decision. So that's kind of where we are at in terms of your funding for the teacher. I know Sean went and spoke to Michelle King. Dr. Daisy's not giving any additional teachers at this point. I don't think he'll give anything, probably, if he gives anything, in August, because of this new May revise, and we are not getting the kind of money we thought we were going to get. There's just not the money to do that. So, that's what the school community and Sean has to decide on how they structure those classes. I know there's questions about Title I. My understanding, you're about 30%, 29%?
30.22%.
Okay. And with the Title I money, I'll tell you, again, my past experience at Venice, for many years, Venice, until I think my second year of being a principal there, Venice never got Title I money, because the district at that time, schools didn't get any Title I money unless they had 65% or higher of their population at Title I. And Venice always had about 45, 50%. It never went much higher than that. And then during my tenure as principal, the district lowered that percentage to 40%. So schools that were 40% or above got money. If you were from 40% to 65%, you got a lower rate than the schools that had 65% or higher Title I kids, and they got the full amount. So for a time, I mean, Venice still has, because they're still, now the cutoff is 50%. Venice is still at about 51%. They're hovering over that Title I money also. So when I was principal there, we didn't have enough money to fund even a full-time Title I coordinator, because we didn't get enough money. So we had a half-time coordinator, and she did that and bilingual stuff, because we could fund a position out of both those, that categorical money. So the district, the Title I allocation has kind of changed as needs and funding from the state comes into play. So, and it kind of varies. So I know it's difficult that you have 30%, but you don't get money for those kids. I understand that concept, because I faced it when I was at Venice, because we had 45, close to 50%, and we didn't get any money for those kids either. So we had to figure out other ways to get money through grants and things like that. So anyway, so that's just kind of a background, and I know you have some questions, so let me just open it up for that.
Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. It's not, I'm sure, your favorite thing to come in and deliver kind of not the happiest news, but I appreciate it. Question about the Title I, how it works, just at a really fundamental level. What's unclear to me is these threshold percentages that you have to meet before any student, eligible or not, gets their Title I money. What happens to the Title I money that's allocated based on the number of students if it's not going to the students? So the 30% at our school aren't getting any Title I money. What happens to that money?
That money goes to the schools that have 99% of the population.
But they already got Title I money.
Well, they're getting Title I money. They're getting more.
So
because that population, that school has, if some schools have 99% of their population are eligible for Title I. So they're getting, and they do a breakdown of how much money the district gets in Title I, then they determine a figure, and again, they're putting it at the schools that the need is the most.
I understand that. I mean, I do understand the principle of that. I'm just trying to understand the mechanics of it, because I feel like when it's communicated, it's always like a little not exactly precise, and then I'm more confused. So I think there's references to kids get their Title I money, which is a reference to the fact that the federal government, it's a per student, right? So it's based on the student. The student gets X by virtue of
and that money goes to the district. Yes.
And then the district doesn't just flow it through to students. The district then does its own thing.
Yeah, determines what the need of the most highest need schools
Okay,
are.
so in that case, based on which school they're going to, the same student could get more than the Title I allocation according to the federal government? Or none?
No,
that's why I'm like, I don't get it. What happens to the rest of it?
I can look into that, because that specific, I don't know. So, but I will get that, and I'll get it to Sean.
Yeah, it would be nice, because without that clarity, like I feel like I understand conceptually. The federal government looks at it as a per student, the district takes it and futzes with it. Okay, and there's a policy rationale for why they do that, and I understand all of that. But it would seem like it must be then that depending, that same student would get more than the federal government intended or originally allocated, or else what's happening to that money? Because there's 30% of our kids aren't getting anything. So that would be so helpful, because if that's the answer, then at least I understand where the money's going.
You have to realize too that there's, some of that money stays centrally too, because services are given, there's people downtown that service those schools. So I mean, there's other monies that the district keeps from the federal government to fund other items, but I can get that. I'll get that answer for you.
I would appreciate it.
The other thing is, you got to realize that it's the money you get, like for 14-15, is based on the numbers from 13-14.
Sure.
Because again, when I got kids from manual arts, I mean, most of those kids, the 500 that came, were probably Title I eligible. We didn't see any of that extra money until then. We didn't see that year. We saw the next year.
Right. That makes sense.
So they do it. It kind of lags a year. Yes.
I just want to ask a question. I'm not sure if this information is correct or not, but from what I understand, there's actually 20 schools in the entire district that receive no Title I funding, no concentrated or supplemental funding. They're also not PAVAL. So we're talking about 20 schools that are really impacted by the 4th and 5th grade, class size increases, and I know 5 of those schools were right, we're talking about 20 schools out of 780, I don't know how many are in the district, that are, their class sizes are really being impacted, and I think these 20 schools haven't gotten together and realized that there's only 20 of us. So I'm just wondering, to extend class size reduction to 20 schools doesn't seem like a huge ask.
But it's a budget item, and so unless you talk to
And I
your
don't know
board
if that
member.
20 schools is correct, those are the numbers that I'm hearing from other schools.
That could, I mean, I don't know how many schools are not Title I across the district, to tell you the truth, but I know it's not a lot, but it's,
Well,
but it's.
it's, they're not getting supplemental, concentrated, or Title I or PAVAL, these 20 schools in particular, so these 20 schools really have no avenues to reach out, you know,
20 schools
so-
out of how many?
700.
Well, elementary schools, I believe there's about 600 or 700 elementary schools. There's about 112 high schools now, because we've added so many high schools and the small high schools and so on. But there's about 112, and then middle schools are in between. But I think there's about 600 elementary schools.
So I would guess that this K-3 reduction probably really only impacted those 20 schools, right? Because those other schools had funds to purchase class size reduction if they needed to.
No, but everybody stayed at, for K-3, every elementary school in the district stayed at 24:1.
So,
Even those, the 20 schools you're talking about, plus all those other schools, and schools didn't have to buy teaching positions with that. Now, some schools got KIA money, this is another class size reduction money, and again, that was based on a formula of what schools got that. I don't know if elementary schools got that, I know high schools did, but again, like
Some
Venice.
elementary schools
Yeah,
did.
Venice never got class size reduction money. I
Right.
never had enough money to purchase additional teachers when I was at Venice. I'm sure that's probably the
it
case.
doesn't make it right. I mean, you know that being a
Well,
principal.
I know it doesn't make
Yeah.
it right,
Right.
but you've gotta then kind of work with what you have. Now, and again, the district is, if you ever watch the board meetings, you will see the advocacy groups that come in, and they're really fighting for the kids of most need, the foster kids, the EL kids, and, you know, so
There's
it's,
kids like that in these schools.
yeah, but not the percentage, and so and they're looking at the percentages.
But taking money, but if those kids don't get that money to give them the support they need, that means that all the kids that are not in those categories are getting less money because their money's going to support that.
Hopefully. Or those
I
kids
mean,
just aren't getting
everyone's
kids just aren't
losing
getting money.
in
Yeah.
these schools.
Around our 4th, 5th grade situation next year, some parents are actively getting the word out that Castle Heights is open to accepting permit applications for 4th grade. And if we can get 8 to 10, we'll have the numbers, and LAUSD will just fund that teacher. But we're running into, there's basically childcare and work are the main ones, and the office, there's a unsociable lady that works in the office and doesn't even respect the people that walk in with questions with dignity and kindness. And so we're getting people that how can we get, there's now a new exemption permit that's stated it was voted in June 2013, Student Health and Human Services, but it's not on the new applications that are available. And do you know what an exemption permit is? Or do you know who we could talk to around, in this situation, getting 8 4th graders in that don't live in the district or have childcare in the district?
In our residence area.
In your resident
Yes.
area, that's
It's
fine.
within the district,
Yeah,
but
within
not
the
within our
district.
residence area.
The, health, I was just looking for Dr. Ueda, because she works with Health and Human Services. I'm not sure, that there's a health exemption. Now, there are some of the schools, and I would assume maybe based on your API, that parents that have kids in schools that are maybe lower performing, they can choose to come on a permit to other schools. I don't know if you got any of those.
You mean the program improvement
Yeah,
schools?
Did you?
No, so far we have nobody who stated that they are seeking an intra-district permit based on the PI status of their own resident school.
Okay. Because some kids are
I'm sorry,
shifting
there's
that
a new
way.
exception permit. I'm sorry, I said exemption.
Exception.
Exception that just says parents should provide any relevant supporting documentation of
Extenuating
extenuating circumstances. And if that situation is that, hey, we need 8 kids here, and hey, their student isn't happy there,
I think it's
can,
family, like the
can the
family
office at
consider.
least accept that application and Mr. Kearney review it?
Well, we, again, those kind of, if that's the, because I've gotten some of those in my office, and it's usually, we look at, like somebody just said, they're like, we had, like, 2 parents that passed away, and their kid was coming to live with a grandparent, so of course we made that exception, because we needed to get that kid in a stable environment. So, I mean, we could look at that, just to get kids, because you're pulling those 8 kids, probably from some other LA Unified school.
Right, but if
And-
4th grade is larger, wouldn't they like to have 1 or 2 less kids in their 4th grade class?
Not necessarily, they might wanna, because maybe that 1 or 2, they might have just made the number by 1 or 2 kids, they lose 2 kids, they'll lose a teacher. I mean, that becomes the issue. A lot of principals won't release kids till after Norm Day. I always kinda hated that, because it's like, oh, you're just keeping your teachers, because then after Norm Day, you can have 300 kids check out, and you're gonna keep that number of teachers at your
You'll
school.
be in jeopardy for the
Well,
following year.
you'll be in jeopardy, yes, for the following year, but you will keep those teachers for the entire year, and then budget-wise, the district loses money on schools like that. Usually that extreme thing doesn't happen. But again, when I was at a high school level, by mid-semester, I was probably 7 teacher over normed. And if they did mid-year renorming, I would have lost 7 teachers, because at the high school level, we were losing more kids mid-year for more obvious reasons of they were dropping out, they weren't coming on a regular basis. So that was another thing that we wanted to keep kids in school. We can always look at the permits. I mean, you can take any permit, and Sean can look at them.
Well, no, the office person will not accept permits that she thinks are not valid, even though.
She takes it upon herself.
The paperwork says you cannot reject a permit application, and
Right.
it can be reviewed and rejected,
Mhm.
but there is no.
Well, I can work with Sean on that. I mean, that's something that sounds like internally that we need to do.
What about, you mentioned overcrowded schools, and so, you know, if we're only looking for like 8 or 10 or even 12 kids, and there are schools in the district that are overcrowded.
Not
are there-
anymore. That's the issue. Because
They
they
built
built
so
so
many
many
schools.
schools, which is a good thing. That's a great thing. They're not schools that are really overcrowded. In fact, we've opened some brand new schools. They didn't get, they were slated for, say, 500 kids. They only got 400, and now they're co-located with charters, because with charters, if there's any empty classrooms, if there's more than 4 empty classrooms on a campus, charter schools can apply for those classrooms. And the West Side, we have 14 for next year, 14 co-located charters on West Side schools.
And Castle Heights is not one of them.
No, I know that. No, that's not one.
No, I wanted
Luckily-
to tell
Yeah, luckily they're,
everybody.
but so most schools now are not overcrowded. That was the nice thing for us when we had schools that were overcrowded. We needed 3 or 4 kids. I'd call Manual Arts and say, has anybody checked in? Send them to Venice. And they would do that. That's not the case anymore, because of all the new schools that they built in the areas that were most impacted, which is great for the kids.
And also we're losing, LA Unified's losing, did you say 15,000 kids
Mhm.
a year?
Well, that's the projection for next year, yes. And again, it's people moving out of LA, some going to private schools, some going to charter schools, and if they don't break it down by.
But that's the net loss.
Mhm. And so when budget determines that, then they give it to our space planning people, and they've got to then kind of determine, okay, so where are those 15,000 kids gonna be lost from? And they kind of spread it out. So a lot of times it's, one teacher or a few kids here, and then it's positions. It's all tied to budget and how many teachers we're gonna allocate. The other thing the district has is, because they're still kind of over-teachered, we have teachers, when we started losing kids, that have contracts, that we now have what we call contract pool teachers that are subs. But they are contracted, they have tenure, because it's only 2 years in LA Unified. For whatever reason, they aren't being picked up by schools to be a permanent, and they're permanent teachers, but they're not being picked up to have permanent positions. So these people are the subs. So, the district got, the people that were our kind of favorite subs and people that just wanted to sub aren't subbing that much anymore, because we've got, I think, last I heard, the contract pool, there's still like about 300 teachers in that. And that's spread K-12. And so those folks are assigned to schools, and then they sub. They're called to sub every day, so they could be in a different school every day, but they're still getting their full pay like they would as a teacher if they were at a regular, if they had a permanent position. And again, that's because the contracts and the unions and things like that. We're trying to whittle that down and trying to get people to retire and or get written up and things like that.
Just a couple questions. If there's teachers that are getting paid that aren't full-time, that aren't working,
Well, they're working at schools, they're subbing.
but they're not full-time subbing, right?
Uh-huh.
They're, I mean,
They sub at,
how often do we need subs?
do you have a-
Not,
do you
maybe
have a-
not even every day.
is anybody defaulted here?
No.
Some of
If we're
that,
getting, if they're getting paid, then.
well, no, but they're, because any given day, I know like the Friday, a week ago Friday, not Friday or Memorial Day, I don't know how many, the Friday before that, district needed 6,000 subs. They didn't have enough subs because so many people took off.
Okay, so.
They didn't have enough, people, even if everybody who was eligible to work, they didn't have enough to cover all those classes. Because I got some emails from a school saying, they split up my kid's class that other teachers had to take because there were no subs.
Okay, so
Um,
then the next question is, if we need 10 kids to, does it matter what grade they are in?
Well, it has to be
They have
fourth or fifth.
Right, so we can get 10 new kinder kids or first grade,
No.
that won't help us.
That won't help us for that situation. We're also looking to fix our numbers problem. We're on that like white is on rice because we need to fix our numbers problem.
Because you said something about third grade. What, you told me?
Second
No,
grade.
next year. Actually, our second grade is a bubble, 108
Oh, okay,
students.
okay.
But it's surrounded by 2 low years.
Okay.
And we're trying to open a dedicated TK class
Mhm.
because we have to fix the leak in our numbers. If we do nothing, a year from now, we will be losing a K-3 teacher, guaranteed. So I can only be responsible for what I see looking ahead in my first year, and we will not have that situation. We're fighting like hell to get that TK class. So what we're talking about is this year that we're kind of stuck. And
How many do you have in fourth grade right now?
fourth grade, right now, we have 93.
And what do you have in third?
We have 78.
Uh,
And that
That's
trough
the-
year, going into fourth grade is what created this.
uh-huh.
And so we're taking permit applications for TK heavily for fourth and fifth. Those are our 3 years that we're really most heavily pursuing. Also, what we did because we had that bubble, we're having 5 third grade classes, which leaves us only 3 second grade classes. And we're going to pack those classes at 28 because we don't want those 3 classes then going to 4 classes in their third grade year and having 18.5 kids per class. That leaves us open to losing a teacher as well. So we're trying to we're being aggressive and we're trying to accept as many permits to really keep track of our numbers to make us healthy and vibrant in the years to come.
Do you have any special programs here, like SAS?
Yes.
We do, we're an SAS school.
Because you can,
And we had the period of April, which was our
well, the deadline, I'm thinking like for next year, the deadline might have passed. And there might be, I mean.
but it's a soft deadline.
No, it is. No, I mean, yeah, no, I get that. I know it is a soft deadline. So, I mean, because that, if the resending school, now because we're out of the window, the sending school, they have to sign off on those. After the deadline, they don't have to sign off on them, but again, you could maybe bump that SAS program. If you have any specialized programs, and then that, allows kids to come to you. I mean, again, at Venice, even before I got there, or right when I first got there, their enrollment was declining drastically, and that's why they started the foreign language magnet. You weren't in the magnet, but the foreign language magnet was mainly started because the school at that time, the administration and some of the teachers saw that there was a deep decline in the number of resident students, and if they wanted to keep the school viable, they added a magnet. Now they have 2 magnets. And again, because all those teachers are folded into your total norm, because they look at the total number of kids.
That's why Carthay is going magnet next year. It's declining enrollment. I mean,
Yeah,
in
that could
addition
be.
to they have a great program and they're excited about it, but I
Yeah.
mean, the motivation was,
They get
they already
the
had it.
different ratios.
But they already had it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Carthay's demographics are totally different from ours, but they went magnet because
Yeah,
they
some
couldn't,
schools
their enrollment
sometimes
was
you have
just.
to kind of figure out a specialized program, and that'll attract kids from outside your residential population.
How long is the TK program going to last? Because it seems to me that's costing the district a lot of money, for 3 months, and it's, it's free daycare is basically,
That came from that's a state decision, was my understanding.
Yeah.
And they lowered it down. I mean, I think it goes to, eventually, it'd be that, I wanna say that September date, but I could be wrong on that.
Right.
And
Right
then
now,
it'll,
it's September 2nd through December 2nd.
right, and I don't know if it does it ever
And
go back
we're,
to August?
I think what the district wants is to get to a point where anybody who starts kinder
Yeah, then it'll stabilize.
is 5 years old.
Yeah, I think at some point, cause they keep backing up the
Right.
Yeah,
age a
it's
month.
another month.
Right.
And then it'll stabilize. I don't know if if it's a September date that it'll stabilize or the August.
Or
date.
probably
But are they
the
gonna get rid of
August.
TK? Because,
No, then it would be, those kids will just go into TK and then.
I know, but TK is sort of if once you're done rolling back, it's sort of a silly, you're putting the people who already have an advantage of age, and you're saying, here, let's have another year of kinder and free, I mean.
Again, that's coming from the state.
And 80% of the country has a September 2 cutoff.
I know.
right. Right, but the question is once, we understand since LA was December 1st, you need to accommodate those parents who were counting on, sending their kids to kindergarten, even though they were 4 before then, you have to accommodate, like you can't just spring it on them, but they've
Once
had
you roll
enough
back.
warning.
Yeah.
they,
Once you roll back, I mean, you don't
Yeah,
give an
it's-
advantage
come
to
on,
somebody who
let's-
already has an advantage of being,
yeah, like the parents get free daycare,
Yeah.
the kids get an extra year of,
and they're already the older
curriculum.
ones in the classroom to begin with.
Yeah.
So. I
Right
mean, it
on,
just
Monica.
seems-
But
I don't
again,
get it. I don't get it. I mean, I would
When
send my
you say
kid to
free
TK if my
daycare-
kid qualified for TK, and I'm all for actually pre-K for everybody because that seems like it would be fair, and the research on pre-K for education is very, very strong. But TK and to leave out a portion of the kids makes no sense to me. Other than rolling it back during the years that we are rolling back the cutoff for kinder.
yeah, I'll find that out. But again, a lot of people, when you say free daycare, there's a lot of people in the city, maybe not right here, sitting in this room, that can't afford any of that. So for them, that's good. And
Right.
again, we
Well,
want to look at
right,
all
but
the
it's
rest of
only
them.
But it should be not just for kids born in this.
right.
Well,
It should
And-
be for everybody.
yeah.
I'm
I'm listening.
question
Go
just
ahead.
around the overall budgeting process. I'm trying to understand if the way the budget is developed is on a per capita basis, or if there are individual budgets for schools. It sounded like there's an example earlier of after norm day having an excess teacher, and in essence, that school running over budget, or being in essence a drain on the LAUSD. So how does it work? Does each school have a budget and has to perform to that budget, or is it they're just getting per capita funds based upon
Well,
panoply
that
of
formula
needs?
is changing as we speak. Like, again, when I was a principal, I got funded for all my teachers. The budgets that I had to worry about were like my categorical budgets, going into the deficit. If I had my Title I budget going in the deficit, I had to figure out a way to pay that money back. I got stipends for coordinators and that from the district. If that went under budget, I was expected to kind of compensate for that. But way back then, the district would just kind of do it for you. You didn't have to worry about it. Now we're going to more of this per pupil funding. So schools will get, based on the number of students they have, they'll get that kind of money and they can determine how they want to run their school. Now for schools that have less than 500 kids, it's really hard to even make your salaries for teachers for that. So again, the district's got to put, kind of put money into that to help supplement that. But some of the larger schools are going per pupil, but like some of the large high schools that have, like Hamilton piloted per pupil, and I know Mr. Garcia there's issues with that too because of, and he's got a lot of students, of just doing your salaries for your teachers, for classified. Then the school gets that budget, you have this amount of money, you gotta deal with how you're going to fund everything and what you're not gonna fund. So for many, many years, principals, they had deficits, they got slapped on the head and they went on their way. I mean, when I started looking at budgets district-wide, I realized how many principals were over budgeted and the district just covered all those, over budgeted items. So the district now, because they brought in all these budget folks, that really maybe aren't school people, but they're just looking at the budget lines that, I know, that's why then they call me and go, wait, I said, we can't do that, because it's not gonna help the school. But again, it's a budget thing, because when we got into this budget crisis, we had to balance the budget and how much over we were. Do I agree with all the budget items and how they're done? No. But again, it's the Board of Education.
Or the school
No,
board?
school board.
Okay.
I mean, we get money from the state, but the school board, you're, and
The
you're,
LA.
who do you have? You
District
don't-
one.
Nobody.
Well,
We're working on
hopefully,
it.
yeah, we'll see what happens. But the board, our board, they make those decisions on budgets.
And I can see somebody being slapped on the hand if they've been reckless in their spending.
Mhm.
But if they're handling the basic needs of the school, the teacher, the custodial staff, the
Toilet paper.
basic bare bones, then running at a deficit is not the fault of the people running the school.
And that's why when Dr. when Mr. Cortinas was was the superintendent, so, you know, we have elementary schools that have like 250 kids. He was gonna start, because those schools, you can't run a school with that few kids and cover all the costs just based on ADA, what the district gets from each student attending every day. And then if your attendance rates aren't good, that's why now there's this big push about student attendance, because that's how we generate money from the state, is through daily attendance, ADA. So schools that only have maybe 250 kids, of course, those communities don't want those schools to close, but they're not fiscally
They're not
sound.
sound.
Charters do it.
They get funded, well, one, they're getting free leases, they're getting free space, so they're not paying, I mean, they're not, it's not totally free, they have to pay the district some money, but they don't have that, and then, you know, they get other, they get public money because they're public schools.
They get it directly from.
Grants also.
Yeah, they get grants, they get other
Sacramento.
things, they get, you know, they have organizations, private money.
They have to pay rent wherever they are if they're not at LAUSD.
Yeah, they build, you know, they have to buy a building and do
Some
something.
charters require a not insignificant donation from each family, too,
Yeah,
like $3,000.
yes.
Why does LAUSD have a kind of all or nothing policy when it comes to either Title I or FABAO? Because if you don't reach those levels, then you get nothing. But you still have those kids, and then how do you service those kids without the proper funds when they've already been allocated from the state, but then the district is reallocating them to other areas?
And you have to, you know, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, that's kind of been what they've done for all the years I've been in the district. To realize that too, with Title I, kids who generate money for Title I are because they're at poverty level. But other kids that can qualify for Title I are kids who are at risk. You know, so I had, like, again, I had kids at Venice High School, they were at the poverty level, but they really didn't require the Title I money because academically, they were doing fine. They just were living in circumstances of poverty, but they were far exceeding the, in terms of academics. So you're looking at the academics of kids in need, and usually there is a
There is an
correlation.
overlap.
There's an overlap with some, yeah.
There is definitely an overlap at
so you
this
might have-
school as well as in general.
Yeah, so you might have kids who are living in poverty, but they're academically doing fine. And then you have the opposite, kids who aren't living in poverty, who aren't doing well at all. So,
Right, but there is a
right.
strong correlation and a strong overlap
Yeah,
between family need and academic need.
right. You know, and just all those extras that, you know, a kid like in family that has many years, like you're gonna probably do the preschool before they get there, you're doing enrichment activities at home and on the weekends, where kids of poverty maybe aren't getting that, so.
But I think
But
you
But I
the
understand.
question's not, I mean, how are we to provide services to a large population within our school that need the services, that have been
But
identified that need
what kind of
this service?
services do your Title I kids need?
They need intervention, they need staffing,
Academically, no, academic-
intervention,
Counselors?
and
Counseling for what?
I mean, I'm not an educator, but I would just think that, you
Well,
know,
I
coming.
mean, sometimes schools
But
can
finding
purchase counseling
resources for
time if they choose.
What
to. A
was
lot of,
one?
Okay,
a
now
lot
I
of-
can-
questions.
I can
a lot
answer
of
that.
elementary schools
I can
don't
answer.
purchase,
They need,
even if they have.
They need intervention. They need somebody. What I told our booster club that I don't like about their budget is that it's going for some things that we really do need, like library and TA, and they go for the wonderful enrichment that you have a right to pay for your children. But there's nothing dedicated to the driving of instruction. And so they would benefit from some person whose sole purpose on this campus is to drive instruction forward. Now you can say that's the principal, but when the principal has no out of the classroom teacher, people, then too much of my time is spent doing other things. So, and intervention, like a Title I school who has 70 students more than we have, we got $30,000 in the LCFF funding. They got $160,000 for 70 more students, and they
But
that
it's the type of students.
yes, but that didn't include their Title I funds either. So they have $160,000 plus their Title I funding, and we have $30,000 to not only do intervention but to fund other things as well. And so we don't have the resources to provide those students what they need academically.
Why don't our kids deserve those resources?
I mean, the Friends budget does pay for, we pay for certified tutors, for outreach, we pay for a bilingual aid. So we are, the Friends, the Booster Club budget is paying at least $20,000. I would say matching what LAUSD is giving us for our new budget, which is $26,000. We are matching services for students that are not giving into that fundraising budget, but we realize that as we continue to be told, as the boats rise, or whatever that saying is.
The water level rises,
You know,
all boats
we've
rise.
also been told that, because our school academically is doing well, and our API is well, probably also with these other 20 schools, that they continue to ignore us. But what's happening is we keep taking hits and hits and hits. And, you know, to say the Friends budget, it does pay for things that,
That's
I mean,
true.
a lot of stuff, I mean, we.
But it doesn't get what we need to have in place. That's what.
Well, it
doesn't
can't make
get-
up for
It can't make up for
basics
what,
Right,
it
stuff.
that's
can't make
my
up for
point.
basics, yeah, so
Right.
that's what, we wonder, you know, when you talk about base funding, like, is it gonna pay for assistant principals? Like, we heard that it was, and then we heard it's only going to 40 schools. Well, 40 schools is not what Prop 30 promised, it promised a restoration of funds to all schools, so.
But again, but because of the funding, it's schools of need, it all goes back to those three categories of students. If you don't have a lot of those students, you're not going to get that extra funding.
But Prop, and I'm not meaning to argue with
No,
you,
no, I
I'm
know, I
sorry,
get
I'm
it.
very
No,
passionate
no,
about this,
no,
but.
that's all right.
You know, Prop 30 clearly said it was going to be a restoration of funds for all schools, meaning base level services, assistant principals, librarians,
But it also
toilet
gives,
paper, we pay for toilet, we pay
I
for
get-
paper, we
I
pay
get
for our
that.
bilingual aid, I mean, the things that these schools are paying for is,
and other schools are doing the same thing, again.
but
I
not with
read-
parent funds, not with parent funds,
Well,
we
we-
pay for this out of parent funds.
But we're being grouped with Warner schools and
Yeah.
other schools that are not being funded, right? The
And
20 schools.
apparently these
Yeah.
20 schools
Right,
are
so we
the
don't
same-
look like Warner. Warner has probably 1%.
But it doesn't matter though, you can't compare it, Warner's paying for needs as well, I
Right,
mean,
but they have-
we
but
can't
they
say
make
we're
up with-
separate. I don't believe that's a little separate argument, but
The
there are
district is
basic
waiting for
needs
this-
that are basic things that taxpayers expected to be paid for as part of Prop 30 that are not going to schools.
And
Yeah.
again, with assistant principals, I know that was an issue that came up, but again, it would be a baseline, and it's not gonna be based on, because of the new funding, it's not going to be based on, years ago, it was a norm generated, you had so many kids, you got an assistant principal. Now, it's going to be based on how many foster kids, how many,
Can't we change that base funding? That's why these parent groups, isn't there a way to change the base before the concentrated and supplemental get allocated out?
I don't think so.
Not
And
until-
That's my understanding.
Not until this school takes a nosedive, and then we lose
Yeah,
it.
then-
And unfortunately, that's
School
the
won't
problem, I mean, that's
Yeah.
the
But
issue.
that's-
Schools that are doing well, then it's really the school community to kind of come together and figure out how do we make our school viable and continue to be viable. I will talk to, I mean, in fact, I'm heading to the options graduation.
We're getting tired.
Um,
We've been doing that for 10 years.
I know, but, and that's it, I
Waiting to
mean,
see what
girls
the
that are,
breakpoint
I mean,
is.
schools that do well, that's how, like, again, when I was at Venice, at that
Problem
time,
is you do well. so-
well, we were doing better than most of the other high schools around us, so they kind of let us do what we were doing, even though we weren't doing, what the state, we didn't have over 800 API, but we were making growth. So we just kind of came together and worked as a community to figure out what we needed to do for the kids that we had. And that, we knew all those parents were involved and all that kind of stuff, so.
And we're talking about opening up, they're talking about now opening up like health centers at schools, but yet we don't have assistant
nurse.
principals. I mean, it's kinda like, I mean, how do we, obviously, there's, lots of us are involved with this District 1 seat to try and make some changes there, because we realize like, we've, from what we learned last night at an event, our district actually has gotten very little, if none, in terms of physical improvements, facility improvements, because our representative, we were told, has not been very vocal about it. So apparently quite a few districts have gotten a lot of improvements that we haven't, so.
Well, there's a lot of schools, I mean, they're bringing that back because
Probably
of all the.
Venice didn't either, you're in our
Yeah.
district too.
No, and what they're pushing money to schools now, because there is bond money left over, to do, upgrades to schools that haven't seen upgrades for a long time. But they take 2 to 3 years. I mean, I was at Venice, they gotta tear down the covered eating area because it's not seismically safe. I mean, it's okay, but they gotta repair it. But it's gonna be 2 years of the process before anything does. They just got air conditioning. They were gonna do air conditioning when I was principal in 2000. They're just getting air conditioning now.
So, yes, you were a district, I'm District One
Yeah,
too.
so, you know, but that money's going out to them, and I would assume when you get somebody in that seat, that will help. And Marguerite was, I think she was very passionate about the schools that she had. So-
She was the one who gave API funding.
Yeah, right.
You know, she was the only one who gave API awards, funding awards. So, but that's water under the bridge.
Yeah, right, you can't do.
Major facility
Yeah.
improvement.
Cheryl's hand up was first.
Yeah, okay, and then I do probably need to leave
I
in
know,
about 10
I
minutes.
understand.
Okay.
Around the fourth, fifth grade situation next year. So LAUSD wants us there, they would be thrilled if we got 10 permit students into fourth grade next year.
Yeah,
That's-
as long as you get the number, they're looking at it.
Yeah.
So is there a point person that we can talk with about questions and specifics so that applications just aren't bounced back and?
I'll get with Sean on that, yeah.
Okay.
Because that, I mean, yeah, as long as if you get the numbers, now again, things won't change until Norm Day, but if you have those numbers, that first week, if you have enough numbers, then we start, I make phone calls and say, well, they'll put the person here.
They have assigned her here for the
Okay.
first month of
Okay,
school.
and that's good, that's so,
So we took care of that part.
yeah, so, and you can kind of, then you have time up until Norm Day, you wanna make sure you don't lose any kids.
And what's the exact number we need for fourth, fifth?
I bet I don't-
180. 1.
181, we're at 171,
Yeah.
kids.
We're on 100 and they say we're at 169.
No, I have 60, that was the ECAP projection.
Right.
And,
That's the ECA projection, how many students?
Because I understand that theoretical things aren't right or people disagree, but we want to know what can we do to make this happen next year. And we wanna be efficient and we wanna do it.
and you need 6 teachers, so you need, the number's 181.
Yes, and we
And
need
we have a
12.
wall in the office.
And the follow-up on our third graders on our fourth grade
Can you
list?
just count them?
We're gonna do a lot of promoting. Skip a year.
I don't hear that, but.
La 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 la.
Just a follow-up on that question, the ratio that we're talking about for fourth, fifth, for 36-1, which is lower in school, except for these 20 schools that she referred to, that ratio is decided by the board, and that's voted on at this next budget, you said?
No, I don't think they're gonna
They're not gonna
change classes,
revisit
they're
that.
not.
They're not gonna.
Uh-uh.
How many board members are actual educators, anyway?
The vote of the people.
Right.
One has a student in LAUSD.
I wanted to
Curious
just-
about that.
Can I
Well,
ask
Monica is a
like
teacher,
10,000 foot-
Steve Zimmer was a teacher and a counselor.
One has a student.
Vladovic was he taught, and he was an administrator.
Okay.
But that's why
Alright.
it's so important to vote,
Yes.
because that is a huge decision maker
Yeah,
for
I
school.
wanted to just ask a much, much, much higher level, it's sort of like a, major left turn from the very specific next year question is, so you have longevity in the LAUSD at different levels, and you're now at Beaudry and you're talking to
No,
leadership.
she's
No, I'm
at
at-
ESC West.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, okay, but you've been at Beaudry and you're talking to leadership. Fundamentally, if you are willing to give us a glimpse into, what do you guys talk about in terms of what is the long-term sustainability of this district? This is what I wonder about is, I'm a product of LAUSD. I was, and I was in busing and the whole schmear, I did the whole deal. And now I have my son here, and every year, more and more things are cut, and more unbelievable things have to be paid for by the teachers. It used to just be like, some art supplies and like field trips and whatever, and now it's like toilet paper. And when we engage in conversations with the district, which has been for me an experience here, but also in my old neighborhood with a school that was 92% Title I and a very different demographic, but it was the same conversations. Fundamentally, it's just there isn't enough money, and when you're here, they tell you, we worry about special need, higher need kids. And I don't want to argue with it. Yeah, of course, we should be worried about the higher need kids. When I was over there, you didn't get the same rhetoric, but it was exactly the same message of like, too bad, and it is what it is, and you're lucky you have what you have, and I mean, it's a very depressing conversation. My question is this: the district, when I'm in this context, it feels like I'm not suggesting that you do this, but in a lot of contexts, it feels like the district wears as a badge of honor that the vast majority of the students in the district are poverty level, high need,
Well, the poverty level is true.
No. I'm not saying it's not, but one of the reasons that the ratio is the way it is because parents like us are out of here. So the 15,000 year over year, some of them go to charter and private, and I will tell you right now, it's a little hard when you're, we voted for Prop 30, and this year we have a smaller budget, not just the staffing, that's its own thing, but to Mr. Kearney's point, 30,000, that's it.
26.
That's all we get in terms of like fungible. It's a little crazy town, and it just gets more and more so. And then we have conversations where basically we're told, do what you're doing, which is to say, raise money and raise a lot more money every year, so that, and I'm gonna characterize it, so that there can be a Band-Aid on top of what's happening, and you'll have good performance for, and then the district can say, what's your problem? Your API's fine. So it is a very much a catch-22. To what extent does the district leadership recognize that, I'm hardly saying something profound. I know it's decades in the making, and I'm sure when you were at Venice, it's a whole thing. But what is, I understand there was a budget crisis in 2008, but we're really entering into like Alice in Wonderland level weird in terms of budget. And schools like this, which are nicely diverse, to my mind. This is a school that looks like the city. It's got a nice mix of diversity. It isn't like the school in my old neighborhood where it was 92% Title I, which is a function of how few people who weren't Title I sent their kids there. That's absolutely true. But it was also 70% Latino, I think there was maybe 2 white kids and a couple Asians. It was certainly not from a child's growing up perspective and the kind of environment that is truly diverse. I don't care what the actual ratios are, 70% of anything is not particularly diverse. That's what is typical, and we're unusual, but we're screwed. And every year it's worse. So I just wonder, and I don't know, I'm sort of asking you to like give us the inside peek, but I assume you guys are very aware of that. What is it that you talk about? Like, is this just it? This is it. So if you parents want to engage with your public school and really believe in public school education, just keep raising more money every year? Is that sort of where it's at?
I don't think it gets quite to that level. Now, Michelle King, because she's the deputy superintendent, she was a superintendent in 3, so she knows these schools well. And so she's very aware of it. Again, as the state changes their funding model, a lot of districts throughout the state are mad at LA Unified because we're getting a lot more money than they're getting because we have this higher need of kids. Because, like you said, maybe some of the parents that have the wherewithal to leave public schools, especially at the high school level, we face that at Venice. We were always trying to get kids back. A lot of times parents will stay in elementary school, and then for middle and high school, they'll go on to something else other than public school.
Is there like an optimistic outlook? Is there anything? Is this just the deal?
I know. I guess what I would say is it's that individual school community coming together to fight for their school.
Which means rates a lot of,
It's not, maybe not, it's not so much
There's 20
amazing.
schools overall, the district dropout rates are down. The district, they have some success stories, it's just.
but not
Yeah.
budget wise. Every year, every school is in the same position we are to
I don't
various
think
degrees.
it's going on.
No,
The
the
twenty
schools,
schools are in our.
no.
Because a lot of these schools.
I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
The school I was involved with in my old neighborhood was 92% Title I. It was a very different school. They are not swimming in money. That is not a school
They're
that
not
doesn't
swimming.
have, not at all, to an extent that's appalling. So the notion that like, somehow it's better elsewhere, which is ironic because of course those students aren't better off, like fundamentally when they were, when they took the birth lottery, they did not score like a giant winner in terms of,
Right.
opportunity, et cetera.
Right.
But they're not, LAUSD is doing what it can to try to make up for that, but it's hardly like there are students in the LAUSD that, you know, oh, that school's in good shape. She was talking about Venice, it's not, I mean, it's hard.
But Venice didn't have Title I money for a long time.
But
If you
but
go to some of these schools,
it doesn't matter, 92% Title I, they were not swimming in money.
I have to
I
say
know we
too,
would-
the Title I money, I mean, for years, a lot of schools got a lot of Title I money, and they still aren't making gains. So, I mean, there's
Right.
been, historically, there's been, mismanagement is probably a harsh word, but a lot of schools got all this money, if there was no oversight, they weren't making any gain. I mean, it's, I think it
Plus,
kind of goes
the
in
budget
cycles.
is giant, it's $7 billion, it's giant, and however much they paid for air conditioning at Venice, I guarantee you it was 10 times what it needed to be.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, that's another, I mean.
It is $500,000 for a non-working fire alarm at the school that I was involved in, $500,000.
Yeah, I mean,
And it didn't
there's,
work.
there's M&O issues and there's
It's
a
a
lot.
big issue.
Yeah, and the whole budget, really the way the budget, I always, as the principal said, you know, they make it so convoluted because so you couldn't figure it out.
Right.
Because, I mean, we would ask questions and I wouldn't get a straight answer even as a principal, so you just kind of figured out how to deal with the budget that you were given. So I mean, I think as long as again, I'm a firm believer in the school community kind of working together to make the best for the kids that they have at their schools. I mean, I'll talk to Michelle about, like I said, I know there's about, like you said, 20 schools that aren't getting Title I funding. A couple, I know at one point they gave extra money to those schools. I don't think that's in the pipeline at this, wasn't much.
Is that true?
Huh?
When Cortina's gave that 85,000 to those 20 schools, we were told
I
that
heard it was illegal.
Was that
I said
illegal?
it
Somebody
was
said
It might have
illegal.
been because you didn't have, you didn't
I
qualify.
cannot independently verify
Yeah.
that, that seems like
Yeah, I don't know.
illegal.
But, and I'll find that out, because I know, like I said, when, for years, a lot of schools, if you didn't have that 65%, and back then it was a lot more schools,
Yeah.
because 65% is a very high number. There were still a lot of schools that qualified, but at that point, there were a lot of schools that didn't. You could apply, they had another grant. And they would give you other money, not much, but not to the tune of what the Title I schools got.
And even that money has dried up. But I know you have a place to go, and I don't want
Yeah,
you.
no, that's right. But I'll find out the
One more
question
quick
regarding
question.
the money of the kids, where does that go?
Yeah.
So I can clear that up for you. I'll find out about the 20 schools and about the TK, how long TK will last.
I have one more quick question.
Uh-huh.
The parent groups were told, the grassroots parent group were told that Daisy was actually going to call Governor Brown because of the $35 million that they're taking out of the LAUSD budget to fund the teacher pensions, that was going to impact the May revise. I'm wondering if you have any kind of,
As to whether he's gonna make a call to the governor?
no, we understood that he was gonna make the call to the governor, but that Dr. Daisy was going to ask the governor not to take out $35 million in one lump sum, but to spread it over years.
I don't know if that's happened. I know at the last board meeting, and then when kind of the local superintendents and what my position is in AOL, we were told that they were still working on trying to do some resolution. I don't know if he's actually made the phone call. I mean, he goes up to Sacramento and he talks to the
So
governor.
there's no resolution on $35 million?
No, I haven't heard anything. I just, because that came, the last board meeting, it kind of came up saying, and again, everyone was disappointed that, because I mean, 2 months ago, Dr. Daisy told us, he said, I think your May revise will be good, we'll be able to give some
Yeah,
things back
as
to
we
the
all
school.
thought.
Yeah, right, and then it was
Then
like,
bang.
right, so I don't know, I haven't heard anything about that. I've heard about it, but I don't know, I don't think there's been any decision, or at least I haven't been told.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
We'll try to figure out the permit thing.
I would love to talk with you.
Let's have
Trying
a
to
box
figure
of
it out.
that.
And were you gonna give out an email address so we can bother
Oh,
you?
I'm sorry, yeah.
I think we already have it.
Some of you have it. It's custodial, because I know the custodial thing came up. The custodial, some of the, I don't know if you got a letter, at one point, a letter went to the principal saying they were gonna be cut 4 hours. Everybody's gonna keep your same custodial hours. So you have a plant manager and an 8-hour person.
Yes.
So that's staying, and that's not being, you're not getting added, but it's not being cut. So,
Why
Thank you.
should we voice our concerns to you rather than like your emails?
no.
That's probably not the most effective way.
well, emails, I guess, emails are, you can call the office. I mean, the office, my office number is 310-914-2102 is the general number. And my email address is jdavis02@lausd.net. You can put it in there.
It's also on the LAUSD website.
Yeah, that's there too. You have to be careful that, because there's another Janice Davis and there's a Janet Davis. And if you, Janet Davis gets a lot of my emails. I know her and she sends them to me.
J Davis 02.
Yes.
02.
Yes, because most people, it's their first name dot their last name.
Right, so you're the third, J. Davis.
Yeah, because when I was at a school site, when they assigned me a email address, and school people got their first initial and their last name.
That's how I am too.
The people that were in offices had their first name, dot their last names.
Oh, wow.
How they, I don't know, that's how they did it when it first rolled out,
Interesting.
10 or 12 years ago.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thank you.